Despite the falling snow is a phrase from a poem by Robert Frost. She tells her love while half asleep, despite the snow, despite the falling snow. And it just seemed to me to encapsulate the feeling of the film. The word despite, I think, captures a lot of what characters go through, in spite of obstacles, in spite of love, in spite of betrayal. And also, of course, the snow, and there's something about falling snow particularly that felt very lyrical for the setting of the movie, which is Moscow in the 1950s and in the movie in 1992.
But it's also very much about human relations, about love, about betrayal, about being true to yourself, and the consequence the choices you make have on generations really to come.
What attracted me to the role is the enigma of this character. And I also think it's a great story. Her adaptation of it is terrific. I mean, it's a really good screenplay.
I read the script first, and then I read the book, and the character kind of erupted out of the book. It was the book that I found the most interesting, because there was all these thought processes and all the intricacies of the character that were in the book that you can't really get to explore or aren't necessarily written on the page.
I think it's not that typical for a writer, of a storyteller of novels, to then be able to translate that skill necessarily into a very tight screenplay and then have the ability to direct. But she always has played all of those roles. And in fact, there's no one who could translate her ideas, her images, her stories better than she can.
Adapting the screenplay was a much longer and more painful process than I had imagined, because I had also adapted the screenplay from my novel The World Unseen. But with Despite the Falling Snow, there are two time periods going on in two parallel stories. I set it up exactly as it was in the book. But what happened was the very interior world of the modern story in the book just did not translate to the screen when compared to the exciting world that Katya and Alexander live in, spying, stealing secrets, all the betrayals. So I really needed to work another layer of betrayal and into the modern story, and to really change that love story to be a much more reflective of what goes on in the past.
Shamim wanted to have the same actress play Katya as well as her niece, Lauren, so that was quite a challenge, and I think it is a challenge for any actress to do. So we wanted to have someone who's right for the film and who could understand the nuances of it.
When I met Shamim and Hanan, our first lunch in London, I clicked. I liked them. Shamim is very intellectual, she's very smart, she's very quick, she's witty, she's funny, she's bright. And when I read her script, I realized there's a lot of music. She's very musical.
For me, it's a sense of the core of the character. So I had a sense of Katya as somebody who encompassed a certain stillness, an elegance, a poise that hides a very broken heart, really, because she's suffered since her parents have been taken as a child, and she lives this very solitary life. So it's more that essence that I was looking for, or that ability to create that essence that I was looking for in an actor, rather than dark hair and dark eyes, which is also another factor of the character, and which in fact turned out not to be the case with our casting with Rebecca. She had two roles, of playing Katya in the past and Lauren in the 1992 story, and I think she is doing a really exceptional job. And I think it's been interesting to work with her because she's very intuitive. Her method is very much by feeling. So she likes fewer words as possible in the direction, and then we hit a feeling and it works. And I think she hit that groove with Katya really early on, and it's been really nice to watch that. She did takes from start to finish that were just beautiful, and it was the first time we were sitting behind the monitor and there was an intake of breath from everybody. Wow, at that take. And I just thought, remember this, because these are really moments that happen a few times in your lifetime if you're lucky, and you go away in the freneticism of the film and you forget that what a privilege it is to be making a film. And I think similarly with Misha, with Oliver Jackson-Cohen, when I spoke to him, I just felt that he embodied that character. Now that isn't always the case, because sometimes I would cast somebody who's completely the opposite of the character they're playing. But I know I can communicate with them enough to create that.
I played the younger version, and then Anthony Head plays the older version. So you kind of see the downward spiral to where he reaches the end of his life. So he's sort of young, he's sort of fearless, but there's definitely something about him that is not all quite there, considering what he does. So there's this element that I know Shamim and I talked about very early on about the fact that he can put on a straight face and pretend to be a certain thing, and then the door shuts, and then he's something entirely different. So there's a lot going on with Misha that I think people won't necessarily see on screen. It's all the stuff that happens behind closed doors that I think is very interesting.
I think it's up to every actor to create their present moment and to have done their homework, to know your whole backstory. My backstory is that I'm a State Department person, undercover. She's a CIA operative as well. And so my background was to, as I live in New York, was to get to speak to people actually in the State Department and within the CIA, which was an interesting conversation.
Working with Charles Dance and Tony Head was quite something. I mean, I was really looking forward to it, and also a little bit nervous because I've done my 4th film. Charles Dance has done God knows how many films, extremely experienced. So I learned very early on that one should not go up to Charles with an idea. You go with a bit of direction. You better know what you're directing. And he was absolutely charming, always super prepared, as was Anthony. Anthony had done a tremendous amount of research into Misha's character and alcoholism and everything related. But working with both of them was really an object lesson in being prepared as actors, in really knowing not only their lines, but really the meaning behind it, and coming to set with something. I wouldn't have to say anything. We would do our first take, and it was always rich and interesting. And then we could go from there and discussing nuances of changes and things like that. But it was really a joy, and they were great fun to work with as well. Both tremendous sense of humor, and really it was a blast, and a great lesson for me to watch really great actors prepared, doing an incredible job. And working with Sam Reid has been absolutely a joy. I think he's a very intellectual actor. He's very thoughtful, and I really appreciate the way he focuses on the script, and he always has interesting questions to ask about every single word of the script and what it means, and really trying to get to grips with the text in a sort of way that I associate more with theatre than film. So that's been a really interesting process to work with him too. But I have a very lovely group of actors to work with. In terms of the look and feel of the film, I was quite specific with my feel for the 50s versus the 90s. I call it the 50s, it's 59 to 61. And there's a photographer called Saul Leiter, who I really admire, who shot a lot of footage, almost all in New York, but around that time period. And there's a softness to those images. There's a sense of always shooting around a frame or through glass or through a reflection. And it was these images that I shared with David early on. And so he's worked really well, I think, to create lighting and a feeling of camera moves that reflect those photographs and that feeling. We're in a world where people are always being watched. We're in a world which should feel different to ours, but I didn't want this sort of washed out black and white world, because people didn't live in black and white in 1960. To me, when I say 1990s, I just think video, I think MTV, I think clean, crisp images. So we tried to keep the 90s a little cleaner, a little crisper, a little more fresh looking, and the 50s to have more filters, to have a softness to the image, we are using a lot of atmosphere and haze. sometimes for cigarette smoke because everybody smoked during that time, but sometimes just to create a softness in the air that you'll just feel in the frame. What I was concerned about when I landed here is it's small compared to Moscow. It doesn't have the same scale. And when we looked initially at exteriors, I was concerned because to get the big boulevard feel that you have in Moscow is going to be really difficult here on our budget. There are a few very large streets, but it's extremely expensive to close them down. It wasn't an option for us. But I began to get very excited when I saw all the rest of the locations and some of the options then we got for streets. But we got to film within Parliament, within City Hall, within the scientific institutes, within the great universities and foyers. And there were some beautiful locations that were accessible to us, which I think would have been very difficult to get government buildings in Moscow. So on the flip side of it being a smaller city, they're very film friendly, and we were able to get access to some really beautiful locations. And as a result, I think we have a film with amazing contrasts. Almost every scene looks completely different. One minute you're in a Kremlin office, the next you're in a rundown Moscow tower block. I never thought of myself as a CGI kind of director, but we've used quite a lot of green screen. We've shot maybe 5 or 6 scenes I think we will have by the end of the film. And that was to give it a sense of Moscow. So we could get some exteriors. We use, I'm learning all about this, we use a little bit of snow and a wall, and there's a base and a green screen behind it. And then we can put onto that in post-production shots of the Kremlin and the river so that it does look as if at times our characters are actually in Moscow.
It's not cold, it's 18 degrees high, 18 degrees. We are February 11th in Belgrade, Serbia, here despite the falling snow, and it's 18 degrees. We wanted it to snow, but it's sunny, so I think it would look strange to have snow coming out of a sunny sky. And guess what? No snow. No sign of snow. Bringing over and out from sunny Belgrade, where it's getting warmer and warmer despite the falling snow.
One of the reasons we came to Serbia is because of the snow. We looked up the metrics for the last, I don't know how many years, and it's always been very snowy during January and February, but we've only had one burst of snow, and then the rest has had to be manufactured snow. Not good for the budget, but hopefully it'll look real. And yeah, the production design of Despite the Falling Snow is definitely a challenge because of the periods, because of Moscow and New York, because of the late 50s Moscow, and then you move into the 60s era, which is with the changes with Khrushchev, and then you have the US style and feel is very different.
I think that my biggest input was perhaps on the colour schemes as well, and wanting to get this feeling of greens, blues, greys, to give us a sense of that era, because those are very typical colours of that time as well. But at the end of the day, all the research in the world is not what a film is about. And so I would say, and our art director, Bill, often said, we're not making a documentary, we're making a feature film. So there is an element where you want to put in a bust of Lenin or a painting or something that will symbolize the Soviet Union when you're coming into a new location, which might not necessarily have been there. So those kinds of things I don't stress over. I'm not somebody who goes, well, if the archives in 1959 didn't have a Soviet crest, then we can't have a Soviet crest. I want the Soviet crest because that tells us instantly in film language where we are and what we're doing there. So all of these things were a balancing act between being true to the time and really being true to what the film visuals should look like. But I'm very happy with the way it's turned out. It's a film of great, great contrasts.
We are on day something, despite falling snow. We're in the second week, and we're in this beautiful art gallery, which is actually the Museum of Yugoslavia. And behind me you can see this wonderful thing, which actually you shouldn't see till you see the movie, but anyway, it's a great portrait of Rebecca Ferguson as Katya, and it's made in lots of different pieces so that you can only see it as it coalesces in one particular spot. So today there's a big scene where she meets Marina, the journalist, and we see this piece of art for the first time. And it's a big scene in terms of extras, gallery opening, crane shots, all of those kinds of things. So a little bit more complex to set up, but we have a bit of time to do it. Just waiting for it to get dark outside because we're surrounded by unblackoutable windows, and it's cold. Did I say that already? I did. Soviet art. This is all from our own apartment, by the way, and I love it. Come over here. Have a look at my splendid Stalin. How's that? I mean, I honestly think we could sell tickets to this exhibition. Let me know what you think. Good morning. Welcome to day 26, despite the falling snow shoot. We are at base camp. Now, base camp is where all the core production activities, costume, makeup, actors' trailers happen for the shoot. And just to give you an idea, I want you to have a look here. So this is the production office trailer. So if you go in there, which I try not to do very often, no, they're very lovely. They've got everything that you could possibly need. It's a mobile working office. This one is costume, I believe. Now I'll just give you a quick spin around here. Up the ramp we go. Costume. And if you come into the costume trailer, sorry, I'm just filming. This is Momirka, our costume designer, her wonderful team, and you can see all the costumes hanging up here for all the different people in the film, all the characters. So we'll have, for example, Katya section here with all the days. Katya 105, it's the scene number is on there. That's what she'll be wearing for today, for example, and so on and so forth. So they do fittings back there. They've got laundry facilities. They've got ironing facilities. It's quite amazing, and drawers full of stuff that I've never really looked at. Gloves, things. Huh, amazing.
One interesting
for Marina, it's not important to make a good first impression with her clothes or hair, makeup. So we wanted to give her a practical look which suited her everyday life. But at the same time, on the odd occasion, she scrubs up well, as the English would say.
His style is very clean and neat, but that was all built on the character. And the character, there was a lot of discussion earlier about that. And I mean, he wears some pretty amazing stuff.
Working with Hanan as my wife and as my producer generally I would say it's really a joy. For me, it's a dream. I asked her first, pushed her really to become a producer when she prevented me from selling my soul in Hollywood over a long time ago, selling scripts, and she's given me a creative freedom that I wouldn't, I think, easily have had. She brings a creative eye to everything. I think she's a very creative producer, and she really moves heaven and earth to make sure that I get as much as I can within the budget and the time constraints. So it's really, I love working with her.
There is nothing that Hanan cannot do when she wants to do it. She manages the people around her. She manages the conflicts. She manages the cast, and she is socially the most easy person to get along with. And ultimately, at the end of every movie that we've done, the entire crew and the entire cast absolutely fall in love with Hanan because she has that electric personality that is so real.
They're partners in real life. They have a beautiful family, and they intimately know each other. They know their strengths and their weaknesses. This is a complex business, making a film, and I think between the two of them, they cover most of the
dynamic, and sometimes it's hard for Shamim. She says, I don't want to sleep with the producer, I want my wife, to talk non-film, but I think in general it works really well. As a director, she's very much efficient. She knows what she wants. She rehearses her cast very well. I mean, we come back home to the hotel at the end of the night, and she still has dinner and rehearses them. On her days off, she rehearses. So she's always, and because she's also a novelist and a writer, she really gets into the characters' reasons and why they do certain things. So when she's ready to take, all the rehearsal and the preparation is already done. So then she is efficient. She ends up with 3 or 4 takes versus 15 or 20 because all the preparation has been done really well ahead of time.
Working with Shamim is brilliant. I mean, she's very precise. I've worked with other directors who have writer-directors before, and I love working on that process because, they have the initial idea, and then through the discussion and the process of the filmmaking, they can be surprised and open to other ideas because they're wanting to renew it. And Shamim has been so open to everything, and she's been very supportive, and I respect her immensely.
It was very, very refreshing for me to work with a female director. It's a first for me. It's also great to have a director who wrote her own book and adapted her own novel to a script. So she knows her characters so well. And I was wondering if she's going to be very protective about her material. But she was quite the opposite, she would always serve the character, and she was always very open to us as actors for suggestions. And her writing is very, very precise in the scenes, and it allows you to fill in the unspoken void. That was great for me as an actress.
Shamim is a very sensitive director. And of course, she works very closely with her wonderful partner, Hanan. I don't think I've had the experience of working with a couple before, but it's really been very terrific. Hanan I'm a producer as well as an actor, so it's wonderful to be seeing her running the show, and Shamim being the creative partner. Shamim is ready anytime, day or night, to answer any questions that you might have about your character. She's extremely interested in actors. Of course, she wants the set and the lights to work and all of that, but ultimately she wants her story to be told, and she realizes, as all the good directors that I've worked with, that working with the actors and making sure the actors can tell the story is of paramount importance. She does that beautifully.
A very good eye, and a very she's a good director. She knows exactly what she wants, and she knows how to ask for it.
She knows what she wants, and she's also open for a creative process for me as well. So we'll do something one way, but she can flip it and do it 180 degrees in another direction as well.
As a writer, I think she's very gifted. The way she puts her pieces together are so easy to follow and so easy to read. It's exactly as how she speaks. She's always done speeches at all my big celebrations and parties. She puts words together like I've never seen. And as a director, I've seen her several times on set. She's very firm, she knows what she wants. And I think this is now the third movie that I've been seeing her direct. And I can just see the confidence. The level of confidence has really, really gone to top form.
I think I do shoot concisely. I think everything I do creatively is quite concise. I tend to write, I don't tend to write 1,000-page novels. They're more like 200 pages, and my short stories are fairly short. I think brevity is underrated. I think it's great to be able to do things compactly and knowing what you want going in. So I think the key to doing fewer takes is to have some rehearsal time. It's difficult on a shoot like this, but the first few weeks, when we weren't shooting nights, I really spent almost every evening having at least an hour with the cast to go over the scenes for the next day. Because when you have intense dialogue between people, it's amazing how differently things can get interpreted. So it's good to have those discussions. So by the time you're ready to have a take, it goes fairly quickly, usually. Often it's the technical steady cams that will go wrong, and you have to keep redoing them.
I think there's so many aspects to this film. It's a love story. It's a complicated story. It's a thriller. There's a tremendous amount of suspense. We don't really know what happens until the very end of the film. And I think that happens finally with a lot of quick pace, so that the audience will be left at the very end thinking, I didn't see that one coming. That's amazing.
So I think as human beings, we look to stories to tell us the truth about ourselves and to tell us how would we react under pressure? How could we react under pressure? Maybe there's something we could do differently in our lives. So for me, those kinds of questions remain universal, and they remain quite eternal in our human condition. So the fact that it happened 50 years ago is almost secondary to the fact that it remains a very human story and a very real presence that people can relate to now.